And welcome everyone to Rock M Radio. This is a brand new episode of Dive Cuts, and there we go. I think I hit the wrong button uh, on the broadcast there. Yeah, so here we are. I am your host Sam Snelling here with a brand new episode of Dive Cuts. To your right is Matthew Watkins. You may know him as at Data Mizzou, everybody's favorite data guy on the Rock M Plus forums. Mr. Watkins, how are you tonight?
Doing well. I'm here.
Yeah. Uh, the last minute had to pull the starting pitcher and insert our strong closer as Matt was called into family duties and so this is what we're doing. We've got our regularly scheduled Wednesday or every other Wednesday now that it's the offseason live broadcast strictly for our Rock and Plus subscribers. Uh, Thank you everybody for subscribing, and we are gonna talk about something because it is a Mizzou basketball podcast and we are scheduled. However, there's not a whole lot to talk about. We can say that Mizzou made the Josh Gray signing official, so he is officially a Mizzou Tiger. We could also say that Tigers started moving onto campus. Summer workouts are going to spin up here. No surprises. Everybody made it. Everybody who we thought is going to be on the team next year is so far enrolled in summer classes and looking like they're going to be on the roster. How exciting was it for you to watch? Well, this is one thing I will say I'm excited about. I finally heard Mr. Warrick pronounce his first name, so now I know how to pronounce it.
That is exciting.
It is because I feel like for like the last few months, what I thought it was is we have access to some old games we could watch and hear broadcasters sort of say his name, and I heard a couple different pronunciations. It seemed like everybody was kind of saying Marquez, and it is Marquez. So there we go. He pronounces it Marquez. If anybody is on Instagram, you can go to the Mizzou Hoops Instagram account, and you get Mr. Warrick. It's one of those things where you have to like scroll past, and there's like a video of Mark Mitchell saying hello. The next one is Marquez Warrick. So there we go. I'm excited to know that. Matt, did you know that?
I knew the last part of his name was pronounced with a Z, but I didn't know there was a W sound in there as well. I thought it was Marquez, not Marquez. So
yeah.
I guess I learned something new.
I don't know how, we're not going to get super into the weeds on this, but I will say, I don't find a lot of the pronunciation keys particularly helpful. I don't know why, but I look at them and it doesn't always make sense to me. I just need that person to say their name. Just let me hear your name. Then I'll be able to say it correctly. And so I will do my best to kind of stick with it because I've been tossing with it in my head for weeks, trying to make sure I actually say it right. And I believe I've been saying it incorrectly on this podcast multiple times. So Marquez, welcome to the Tigers. And we are actually going to talk a little bit about the young man because with not really being a lot to talk about, I figured we'd kind of do these in a little bit of segments, and I think we're going to try our best to maybe get some guests on, so you don't just have to listen to us talk about a Tiger team during the off season where there's not a lot going on, and get some different perspectives. But I think what we're going to do when there's none we're just going to focus on one part of the team. And so what we're going to do is we're going to focus on the ball handling.
Sounds good. I will add before we get into that, there is one other small tidbit of news that came out, and that was that Mizzou will be tipping off the first game of the season at Memphis.
Oh, yeah.
In the return game. That was the only other very small nugget of news since the last time we convened. And, we knew that game was coming. We just didn't know when it would be. And it so happens to be the first game of the season. So big challenge on the road right off the bat. But anyway.
So for subscribers, I've been keeping track of the non-conference schedule and the dates that we know. So if you're on the forums, you can kind of head over there and check out all the dates that we know, and then the games that we know are happening but don't have dates. And so I think as things tick off, we'll slowly get towards a complete schedule. I fully anticipate us to reach late August, and we still don't know usually 3 or 4 teams, and they're all bye games.
Yeah.
And then they all just sort of drop at the same time, usually during a schedule announcement.
Let's all appreciate year one when Dennis Gates decided to drop the non-conference schedule via tweet, and he scheduled them about 30 to 45 minutes apart. So throughout the entire course of the day, we learned the non-conference schedule, and that was probably not my favorite moment of the Dennis Gates era, but we learned it anyway.
No, yeah, definitely. Especially trying to drop a whole lot of interest for people who are, have to wait for a video to drop to let them know that you're going to play Mississippi Valley State. I don't need a whole tweet for that. I feel like we could knock out like Kansas, Illinois, Minnesota. These are I understand making a big announcement for those, but all your big bye games, man, just drop that news with the with one tweet, and we'll kind of get there. So the banner is at the bottom of the screen now. It says talking about ball handling. The reason I kind of wanted to start here is because you've already kind of been into some of your data reviews on RockM Plus, and so it kind of made sense to revisit some of what you've been covering. In particular, I feel like at this point, maybe not everybody knows what we're going to get from Tony Perkins, as far as general Mizzou fan, right? But I think we know a good amount of what you're going to get from Tony Perkins. There's still a lot to learn about what we could be getting from the guys behind him. So I don't know how much time I want to spend on Tony Perkins, mainly because I fully expect him probably to play the most minutes in the team. If you had to stack 1 through 15, who's going to play the most, who's going to play the least. Perkins would be, barring injury, the most. Available minutes, I would put him probably 73 to 80% of the minutes probably going to go to him. And then at that point, you're looking at Anthony Robinson and Marquez Warrick as a potential sort of stopgap guy, even though he's never really been a primary ball handler. I think I want to kind of start with Ant, because here's a guy who the staff is very high on. I don't think a lot of us had a lot of expectations for him kind of coming into the season. He was playing behind some very experienced guys. We thought of the freshman, he might see the least amount of minutes, and he ended up, seeing the most, and kind of being the most disruptive guy. There's still a lot of things in his game that need work, but when you were kind of diving into, the data and sort of what we might be able to expect, what are the things that stood out to you about Anthony Robinson?
Well, unlike some of the other guys that I've dove into, I've actually seen Robinson play every minute of every game. So that helps. And that helps inform me of what I'm to be looking for and what might be kind of laying in the weeds, so to speak. But Robinson's biggest characteristic to me is his ability to defend and his athleticism, speed and athleticism, which works primarily well on defense, but can also work on offense as well. You know, a lot of folks, and I do not blame them one bit, will look at his shooting percentages and like, didn't really have a very good season. And, you know, there's a lot of truth to that. But I've actually been going through and looking at some comps of freshmen for this year's incoming freshmen. And I'll tell you what, even a guy like Honor Boateng, you know, you're looking through what those guys were doing, how efficient they weren't that good, you know, in the grand scheme of things. And Ant wasn't that good either. But considering where he was rated, which was a 3-star, probably 150 plus nationally, you know, there wasn't a whole lot of gap between him and, you know, top 30 wings, top 20 to 30, not top 25 and higher, but that kind of next segment. But anyway, that aside, the thing that really impressed me about looking at his numbers is that he did a lot of the easier things not so well, you know, when it came to making layups that weren't contested, easy looks in transition, open threes. He wasn't real good at that. And that's a knock. But then when you look at the things that are hard to do, or at least that I consider hard to do, and that's being creative with the ball in your hands, being able to be efficient, get teammates involved, scoring, he was actually very good in a pretty limited sample size. But, you know, for a freshman, that is a key characteristic, I think, is someone who can be able to create for themselves with the ball in their hands, off the bounce, pull-ups, attacking the rim, whatnot. So, you know, when I look at a guy who's going to, or when I'm looking at anyone for that matter, to project improvement on the next season, if you just clean up the easier things and become decent at them and do what you're already doing well, and continue to do that well, you've got a really good chance to be a pretty good ball player. And especially when you compare and contrast that with what he does defensively, which is already sound, and what I am at this point expect to be a pretty improved defensive unit. Having a guy like him manning the perimeter at the guard spots with Tony Perkins on the floor, I mean, you've got the potential to have a very disruptive, lengthy, athletic duo up there that Mizzou probably hasn't seen a guard combo like that defensively since the Mike Anderson era.
Yeah, I would say like I was really kind of impressed with, you know, kind of the level of maturity that he played with for a lot of the year. He has a little bit of that Jordan Geist feistiness,
Yes, he does.
you know, pestiness to him. The thing that, you know, you hate to play against. I love it if he's on your team, but just, you know, the ability to sort of stir the pot without it looking like you're stirring the pot. But, you know, I think you're right. Like, he wasn't good on like catch and shoot threes. He wasn't very good. You know, like we have standout memories of the season of Anthony getting sort of chased down, blocked at the rim on you know, breakaways. Some of those things are like learning curve things.
Right.
You know, in high school, you can sort of slow up and expect to basically be allowed to shoot your layup, you know, or dunk. And in college, like there are just not going to be any gimmies as long as you know, the game is close or you're playing a particularly heated rival. You know, but I do think, like, I agree with, those are all things that guys can learn from and get better at. The level of maturity that he displayed within the offense, within the framework of the offense, his ability to sort of, you know, generate his own shot in certain circumstances, you know, the defensive side, I think there's a lot of reason, and you know, this is why I'm really kind of curious to see what, you know, how they handle his minutes. Because I do think that what we have seen from Gates in the past isn't necessarily like what we're going to see this upcoming year. And I think like this is really an opportunity for Dennis to kind of, you know, get away from, you know, maybe like the safety of, you know, the experienced guys like Shawnese, Nick Honor, that we've seen the last couple of years and move into, obviously, Tony Perkins would be very, very safe guy to play. Warrick, similar. But the ceiling on Robinson and sort of what he can bring to the rotation when he's in is something like I hope he really starts to press some of the older guys for their minutes and starts to take some of their minutes, because I think that's going to be a good sign.
Yeah, at this point, you could make the argument Mizzou is even a little light in the point guard department. Tony Perkins is a point guard. Anthony Robinson didn't really play point guard duties last year, but these things that I've described that he excelled at are very much point guard related tasks. I would expect, if Tony Perkins is playing 25, 28 minutes a game, that every minute that he's not playing at the point guard position, Ant Robinson will be. So you kind of have that as your baseline of the amount of minutes he's going to play, which is at least 12 to 15 a game. And then depending on where he expands out, if he can start taking minutes from other combo guards, they want to play multiple guards at the same time. Just the rotations and how that works out. It could even be more, but that to me is the baseline for him right now. And I'm excited to see him. I spent months this winter talking about how the benchmark for success in the Florida State program was getting guys to improve markedly from year 1 to year 2, no matter where they were ranked. And this is going to be the kind of the first year where we see whether that takes hold. And if it does, Ant Robinson is at the top of the list as far as guys you expect to see take that next step and become a pretty big contributor.
Another thing that I like, and I realize this is, this is probably something that people are less concerned about. Like, his defensive rebound rate was almost as good as like Jesus Carolero. And I realize that a lot of people aren't going to be like, oh, but so Zeus was at 11.3%, which is not great for a big.
Not good for anyone.
Mabor was at 12.7, and Ant was at like 10.3. Like, he's a guy, like, and you could see it. There were several times he's not afraid to kind of stick his nose in and get rebounds. I think in order for you to be a good rebounding team, you need guards who can rebound.
Absolutely.
That's one of the reasons why I like Tony Perkins so much,
Mm-hmm.
and why I think some of the concerns that Missouri has sort of had, and I realize like there's always going to be an element if they are playing up tempo, if they are playing a sort of swarming, trapping style defense, that you're always going to see a little bit of a higher offensive rebound rate, because typically guys can get out of position, more frequently than if you play a sound gap style defense. And that tends to lead to offensive rebounds. But it's one thing to like give up slightly more than the average, and the other to basically just get abused on the glass, which is what we've kind of seen from this team over the years.
There's bad, and then there's what Mizzou's been the last 2 years. Two different things.
Yeah, exactly. And so like one of the things, and I highlighted it during the year, and granted Jordan Butler is not going to be around at Missouri anyway to sort of show his growth as a defensive rebounder. But one thing I respected about like the freshmen is when the freshmen were in the are in the game, the percentages on the glass improved. Mm-hmm. Some of that is just that like you're subbing out 5'10" Nick Honor and putting in, what do they have him listed as?
6'2". I saw, yeah.
But long arms. But isn't he like +6 or +7 in his wingspan?
That I don't know.
I feel like I remember something. He's
like
long.
That.
He's very long.
Wiry athlete.
But yeah, so essentially, like you're subbing, out, and no offense to Nick Honor, but a short guy with short arms, for a guy with what I would say probably average size with long arms, and same with kind of like Trent Pierce and Jordan Butler, guys who could actually rebound. It tends to help when you have just more size. Anything else that you want to touch on an Ant?
No, I think that about covers it. I guess the one thing I would add is that he did miss some time midway through the season with, I believe it was a death in the family. And when he came back the last 8-10 games of the year, he was good. I mean, his numbers were good. So that's also helpful. Kind of looking for what the springboard is for next year.
127.1 offensive rating.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it wasn't a high usage situation. Sean East was doing his thing. Mizzou was scratching and clawing, trying to do what they could to get a win. But, Ant kind of flew under the radar late in the season. He played really well.
A 7.6 turnover rate.
That's good. That's lower than Nick Honor, and Nick Honor excelled at that.
Yeah, that's a terrific. Now, and it is lower usage, and with more usage, you tend to tick up with turnovers. But yeah, I'll take that. So when it comes to stopgaps, our man Marquez has not been a primary ball handler in the past. And looking at sort of like, without completely repeating myself and things that I've said in recent podcasts, one of the reasons why I would have gone after another ball handler is because I would have preferred a little bit more safety in that. Maybe they're confident enough in Ant to kind of pull up backup duty. I also tend to think something like this, like you can guard a little bit more against injuries, guys getting banged up, even if it's just for a little while. Like we kind of saw what happened with Mizzou and Sean East had to step out. Things got ugly pretty quick.
That was bad. Yeah.
That's why I would have preferred to have a little bit more consistent ball handling being imported over somebody like Warrick, who I think is a little bit more of a bucket getter. However, I do think within the frameworks of Dennis's offense, you don't need like a tried and true point guard. You need a trusty ball handler who can get the ball up the floor. And so we're not looking for, like everybody thinks of, I would say like a Phil Pressey or a Melvin Booker, a guy who you just give the ball to and he's going to generate a lot of offense. I think to a degree, like Tony Perkins can do some of that. But the bigger thing is don't turn the ball over from, the baseline to the 3-point line. Like, let's get the ball up the court, no turnovers. Let's initiate the offense. And I think Warrick can do that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And, I don't know that either of the last two seasons are going to be perfect templates for what Mizzou is going to try and do offensively. But the way I conceptualize it with the addition of Mark Mitchell, and I'm tempted to talk about him here for various reasons, but I won't because he's not a ball handler by definition. But I think in adding him, you're going to look at more of an offense like year one. And again, not an exact replica, but Nick Honor was your point guard, but he wasn't doing what Sean East did as a point guard last year. They're two very different things. As you said, he'd bring the ball up, he would enter the ball to the high post Kobe Brown, and then they'd run their offense. And if that didn't work, they would get the ball into Dre Golston's hands, who would run pick and rolls, ISOs, whatever, ball dominant offense, late clock, and that's where he would score. I think that's more what you're looking at this year. That's not to say Tony Perkins can't generate offense. He can and he will. But I think they're going to try and look for different avenues than simply spreading the floor and running screen and rolls with your point guard up top, which was a lot of what they did with Sean, not just up top, but all around the perimeter. So where I see Marquez Warrick coming in is more of the Dre Golston situation where he was he had the ball in his hands a lot. And it was usually late clock. It was usually designed to get him the ball in his hands, and he would just go to work, and that's kind of the player that Marquez Warrick is. He's different. He's a better shooter outside, and probably he's not as big of a broad-shouldered guy. And how efficient he'll be in those actions where he's having to pound the rock and go get his own offense remains to be seen. Dre was excellent at doing that, way beyond my wildest beliefs of what he could do. But I think conceptually, that's what we're looking at with a Warrick here. And he will have those moments where he looks a little bit more like Demoy Hodge, where he's spacing the floor and hitting catch and shoots, where Golston didn't so much do that. But I think that's more where he works into the offense. Not a true ball handler, not a real initiator of the offense, but more a guy that you can get the ball to and he'll go get his own.
Actually, bringing up, Dre reminded me, he just signed a professional contract, believe in, what was it, Switzerland?
I saw the announcement. I did not look up where the team was. But I know he was putting some numbers for his last team.
ESSM Le Portel. Professional sports team. No, France. In Le Portel, France.
Okay.
Have you been to Le Portel?
I have not. I'm sure they'll enjoy him over there, though, as much as we did.
That doesn't look too bad. Yeah, it's on the West Coast, very close to England. Sorry, this is lovely live broadcasting. Interesting. Yeah, I just completely sidetracked because I was thinking there's another news nugget, everybody. Dre Golston signed with Le Portel in France. So we are all
butterfly.
We are all now ESSM Le Portel Vikings. It looks like they are. Côte d'Opale. My French is horrible. I took Spanish all growing up. I can speak Spanish decently. I cannot speak French. Never have been able to. So I don't disagree with you on Marquez. I don't think he's ever going to be a primary ball handler. I think it's always important to have multiple ball handlers on the floor. And, when I say multiple ball handlers, again, guys that you trust to get the ball up the floor to get the offense started. It doesn't necessarily mean Mark Mitchell can catch the ball at the 3-point line and attack the rim but he's not really a guy that you want bringing the ball up unless it's a transition opportunity. Mm-hmm. But the other team makes a basket, they sink a free throw, whatever, you're bringing the ball up naturally. These are the guys that we're talking about. And in that aspect, I think Warrick is probably the most likely guy to kind of catch some of those additional tallies up the court. And I do like that, one of the areas that there was a weakness on the team last year was not just with the depth, but the depth and guys that could actually go get a bucket. And here is a guy who did that as prolifically as anybody in college basketball last year.
Yes, he can score. I didn't know if that was a segue, but yeah, I believe he set the Northern Kentucky all-time scoring record back in February of this year with plenty of time to spare. Scored well over 2,000 points in his career. His first year, he was kind of a complimentary piece, but after that, his sophomore, junior, and senior years, he was the guy. I mean, I made the comparison to Sean East this year. That's what he was like for 3 straight years at Northern Kentucky. He didn't play the exact same game. I don't want to give you the wrong impression. Sean and him are different players. But when you think about how many shots and how much offense revolves around one guy, after Mizzou had the injuries midway through the year and Sean East was just told that, hey, go create offense, that's what Marquez Warrick did for 3+ years. So, he's scored a metric shit ton full of buckets. And he's done it pretty efficiently. You know, there's always going to be some questions about moving up from the Horizon League to the SEC. Des Moines Hodge and DeAndre Golston answered those very easily, but that's an outlier, both of them. But you'd still expect him to be a pretty prolific scorer in smaller amounts at Mizzou next year. I haven't quite waded into the point per game projections, but you know, I wouldn't be surprised to see him nab a few 20-point games along the way at all.
Yeah.
You know, that's what he does.
I would like to know. So I just completed a 2-part series. I'm thinking about expanding it to give a little bit more data during the COVID years. If you haven't read that, you can head over to the main site, rocketnation.com. I posted them each this past weekend. I thought it was interesting, which is why I dove into that data, but it was based on experience. The reason I'm bringing this up is because there are 2 guys in the SEC coming into this year who have played more than 4,000 minutes of college basketball.
Oh, goodness. That's a lot of hoops.
4,000 minutes.
That's like what I watch a week. That's insane.
Yeah. Those 2 guys are Mark Sears and Marquez Warrick.
How about that?
Yeah. So there's like some really, really interesting nuggets in those two those 2 sort of experience. It's kind of based on like, you know, looking at the level of experience that the SEC is importing versus sort of where they were, you know, pre-COVID.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like 2 guys have, because that's a career, like that's a full-fledged career of, you know, more than 1,000 minutes a season, and you're getting like they're both could scream past 5,000 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't surprise me. You know, Mark Sears definitely. Warrick probably has a few more hurdles to clear with the depth of Missouri's roster, but I mean, he's at 4,218 minutes for his career. So he doesn't even need 800 minutes. I think he can get 800 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I was just doing the quick math in my head. If he plays just say 20 minutes a game, that's 200, 800 minutes, 400 minutes if he played 30 games, 600 minutes. Yeah.
So
yeah, it's definitely possible. Check the math on that.
I'm not going to do any math right now, but so he's the leader coming into the season for most minutes played. And let me just do this real quick.
600 is right at 30 games. So 600 plus minutes, not even playing a huge role.
And there are 9 guys who have played more games, including Tony Perkins. Tony Perkins has played 126 games. Marquez has played 125. So there you go. Again, like this is all like I'm gonna expand some more like on the that stuff, but that's not what we're talking about. The last guy that we kind of want to touch on before we saddle up and get out of here is T.O. Barrett, and there is a question mark there because somebody is not going to play.
Mm-hmm.
And while I do think that the staff really loves Barrett, and he is a fierce defensive player, the offense needs a little bit of work. We've talked about all these things. He is a guy who I think still factors into the long-term plan, and as long as they sort of present all of that and they stay on top of him with their plan for development and show him what kind of minutes can be available next year, I think he's a guy that they could really develop and get to stick around. However, he's probably going to have a tough time getting minutes this season.
Yeah, at least on paper, I would agree with that. I mean, you know, one of my pet projects throughout the course of the off season, is, if you've been reading the board recently, you know, is that I try and go through and project minutes and just try and sort this all out based on a whole variety of factors. I'm If it's something you can consider, I consider it. But the fact of the matter is you have 200 minutes in a standard game that have to go around. And when you have 15 guys that are, we'll call them scholarship players because they would be scholarship if they're not, they're getting scholarship level accommodations, we'll call it that. It's just not possible for 15 guys to get routine minutes. And even if you spread them out as thin as you can and you stretch, you take some from the top, which you might not want to do from your best players, you rob from them and you rob all the way down. You're still talking about for spots 13 through 15, like a max of 5 minutes a game, and that's spread as entirely thin as you want, or you could possibly do. So, when you talk about a player, it's easy to say, oh, you should play more. Well, only 5 guys are allowed on the floor. So someone's going to come off, and that's my segue into T.O. Barrett, that, injuries happen, some amount of improvement surprise or regression surprise from guys you thought you might be better or lower on the spectrum. Those can always change, but it's real hard to see Barrett having much of a meaningful role. And we're talking meaningful, like top 10 in minutes. I don't see it at this point. And yeah, yeah, I like him as a player. It's just when you got 15 mouths to feed, someone's got to feel the stretch. And I think T.O. Barrett is probably going to be that guy, at least in the backcourt.
Yeah. And this is one of the things that I really feel is important for the staff and sort of like some of the bets that they've made on some of the younger guys. It clearly didn't work out with Jordan Butler for whatever reason. But the fact that both Anthony Robinson and Trent Pierce still seem pretty bought in is a good sign.
And to a lesser degree, Aiden Shaw.
Yeah. Very much so. And so, I think one of the things that is going to be important, particularly with this freshman class, is sort of allowing them to understand that, we are going to give you opportunities, but Dennis is also it's important that he have a good year. And, I'm the last person that is going to put a coach on a hot seat, but I mean, 0-18 is 0-18.
Yeah.
And when you're coming off a year like that, this is why they were so aggressive in the transfer portal, why they, really went out and were aggressive with getting guys like Perkins and Mitchell, and Warrick and Cruz, and as well as Josh Gray for that matter. But really guys who could, I think, what they thought could help them put themselves in a position to be an NCAA tournament level team coming off that season, which is going to be important because if you have another bad season, and there's a lot of people who would look at the way he's recruited and said, "Oh, well, we're just going to give Dennis Gates time." I don't think you get that luxury anymore. I think you can get away with having a bad season, but I don't think you can get away with having 2 in a row, not with the way that the transfer portal works now. There's just been too many people who have turned it around immediately. And is that fair? No, I don't really think it is, to be honest. I wish there was more of a belief in development. I wish there was more of a buying into long-term goals. I wish there was, more investment into the team than investment into buyouts. But the reality is if Missouri were to have another rough season, Dennis Gates could find himself out of the job next spring, depending on, how rough of a season and what happens. I'm not putting him on the hot seat. With that said, I think that's why you have to talk to guys like T.O. Barrett. You have to talk to guys like Trent Burns. And you have to maybe even Marcus Allen, and you say, look, this is our long-term goal with you. This is where we see you being at this point. Minutes are going to be hard to come by this year because we need these older guys to hit. And I think that's one of the things is just going to come down to for Barrett is they need older guys to hit. They need older guys to to play, to score, to defend, and you're very unlikely to get that kind of production from T.O. Barrett at this point.
Yeah, I mean, even considering the point guard situation, and we're being very liberal here with the term point guard and the players we're discussing, but even these four, I mean, you look at who T.O. Barrett is fighting for time with, and Tony Perkins was an all Big 12 or all Big 10, I'm sorry, all Big 10 second team player a year ago.
It's cool. There's like 16 teams in that league now. So, I mean, why are we still the Big 10?
I was thinking Big 10 and then second team, and I put them together. Big 10 second team performer a year ago. He's a fifth-year senior. Marquez Warrick, another fifth-year senior. All-time leading scorer at a school that Dennis Gates is well acquainted with in the Horizon League. Anthony Robinson, very similar spot to T.O. Barrett a year ago, but he performed pretty well, and he's back for his second year. He's a year ahead. It's just whose minutes does he take? And that's how you have to look at it. And it sucks, when you're talking about a guy that we both like. But at least for this year, it's hard to see.
I agree, Mr. Watkins. So we're going to leave it at that. I told you we're going to try to keep this brief. I feel like we're going to have more stuff to talk about as the season goes on. We're all at the point, I think, of taking a little bit of a deep breath post-portal season. Matt Harris is working on some pieces that should be coming out in the next couple of weeks too. I'm actually going to add more data to my experience pieces because I'm really kind of curious as to how many minutes we've been importing since that initial 2019 season. So we'll look at some of those in chart form. You're developing all kinds of charts and graphs, or what we can expect for the team this year. All of that is available, for our subscribers. I am all of the data that I was sharing, on the forums before I published the post. I kind of like using the forums as almost like a rough draft for some basic thoughts about things, particularly when I'm kicking around these sort of ideas of things
more
to write
informal.
about. Yeah, it's really interesting. Then you can kind of get feedback and respond to it that way. So for those who are not already subscribed, please head over to rockm.plus and sign up. We should have some exciting announcement news coming soon. I don't want to break it just yet because I think the final confirmations may be coming in the next couple days. But we'll definitely put something out on the tweets to let everybody know what's going on. I think it's going to be good news for those who are already on board for Rock'em Plus, and maybe those who have been waiting to pull the trigger. So be on the lookout for that. We're going to be off for 2 weeks. Hopefully something good happens in that time. I should make sure it's good news, not bad news. And we can have something more to talk about. If not, like I said, we're going to start trying to spin up some guest stuff. Matt Harris, we'll put him on the hook to make sure he's doing his fair share of podcasting, and then we'll all get through this summer somehow, some way. So make sure you're subscribed, all that stuff. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we will be back in 2 weeks. Until then, thanks for tuning in.